Hi everyone! This video is going to be about solving multi-step problems with fractions and mixed numbers by using order of operations. This video corresponds to lesson 4.4 in your notebook. As you've been learning in class, there's lots of different ways that we can solve various problems that are multi-step. There's not always just one way. So we're going to take you through a few multi-step problems and show you one or maybe even two ways to solve each problem. Remember, if you come up with a different way of solving a problem but you have the same solution, bring it into class and show us. Let's look at this question. You saw this in your notes for lesson 4.4, but we want to use it again to explain how we can go about solving this multi-step problem. John is cooking enough lentils for lentil barley soup and lentil salad. The lentil barley soup recipe calls for 3/4 cup of dried lentils, whereas the lentil salad recipe calls for 1.5 cups of dried lentils. John has a 1/8 cup scoop. How many scoops of dried lentils will John need to have enough for the soup and the salad? So when looking at this problem, I could say, all right, he needs 3/4 cup of dried lentils. How many 1/8 scoops fit inside 3/4 cup? Then for the salad, I could say, oh, he needs 1.5 cups of dried lentils for the salad. How many 1/8 scoops would he need to use to get to 1.5? Or I could just add the amount needed for the salad with the amount needed for the soup, and I can find in total how many scoops John would need before I split it up into the salad and the soup. So as you saw in class, when we analyze this information, we can always rewrite the information or underline the information that is needed. He needs 3/4 cups of dried lentil for the soup and 1.5 cups for the salad. He has a 1/8 cup scooper, and we need to find the total number of many scoops of lentils he needs. So that's the important information. When we're thinking of a plan, we can do it one of two ways. The way it's showing here is that you can add 3/4 and 1.5 to get the total amount of scoops he's going to need. Then you can divide it by 1/8. And then you'll see in total how many scoops he would need. So let's look at how it was solved. If we take 3/4 and add it to 1.5, it's like saying 3/4 plus 3/2. Remember, that 1.5 is a mixed number. It has whole numbers and fractions. If we wanted to just make that into an improper fraction, it would be 3/2. And adding 3/4 plus 3/2 is a lot simpler than trying to add the mixed number. So always change your mixed numbers to improper fractions when needed. Now 3/2 is also equivalent to 6/4. So we can add 3/4 plus 6/4 a lot easier when we make the denominators the same. In order to make the denominators the same, we have to use a common multiple. So we know that 2 and 4 have a multiple of 4 in common. So all we need to do is change 3/2 into fourths. 3/2 is equivalent to 6/4. When we add them together, we get 9/4, which is 2 and 1/4 cups of lentils. So he needs that in total for the salad and the soup. We take that 2 and 1/4, and we are going to be dividing it by the 1/8 cup scoops, because we want to see how many scoops he needs. So take the 2 and 1/4 cup, and then divide it by 1/8. And when we divide fractions, we take the first fraction, 2 1/4, change it into 9/4, and then we divide it by 1/8. So it's 9/4 divided by 1/8. But we're going to use the opposite of division. We're going to use multiplication and the reciprocal of 1/8, which is 8/1, which is right here. So 9/4 times 8/1. Now you could just take 9/4 times 8 over 1 and multiply it out and get 72 divided by 4. And we can quickly see that 72 divided by 4 is going to give us 18. 18 is our answer. And as you can just multiply across and then divide, changing this improper fraction into a mixed number, or you can cross cancel. And some of us are really good at that, and some of us need a little bit more help. So do the strategy that you understand the most. But as you can see here, in this step, this person cross canceled with 4 and 8, found a common factor, and the common factor, and we usually like to use the greatest common factor because that gets it into the simplest form, would be 4. So we divided 4 by 4 and got 1, and 8 by 4 and got 2. So it becomes 9 over 1 times 2 over 1, which is 18. So John will need 18 scoops of dry lentils to have enough for both the lentil soup and the lentil salad. Okay? So what were the steps that you just took to answer that? You added 3/4 and 1 1/2 first to find the total number of cups. Then you divided that sum by 1/8 to find the number of scoops, because the scoop was the size of 1/8. Now we're going to try some problems on our own. Take a look at this question, press pause on the video, try to figure it out on your own, and then when you press play, we'll go over this question and the steps needed to take in order to answer it. Okay, let's look at this question together. When I read this question, I then took out the most important information needed in order to answer it. So as you can see, I created a little chart. If Naomi has earned $54 mowing lawns in the past 2 days, and she worked 2.5 hours yesterday and 4.25 hours today, how much is she making per hour? So we can do this one of two ways. First, I think about the important information. I know that she's making $54 mowing lawns, not lawns. Lawns. She works 2.5 hours one day and 4.25 hours the next day. How much is she earning per hour? So, what would you do if you were actually Naomi? You probably add up the hours you worked total across the 2 days and then figure out how much you made per hour. So that's one thing we can do. So we can say, well, she worked 4 1/4 one day and 2 1/2 hours the next day. And I want to add these together. I notice 1/4 and 1/2 do not have the same denominator. In order to add them, they do. But I also know that 1/4 and 1/2 have denominators that are common factors of a number. So I could probably look at my halves and make them into fourths. So 2 times 2 is 4, 1 times 2 is 2. So 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. I could leave 1/4 there, and I could add 1/4 plus 2/4 and 3/4. And then 4 hours plus 2 hours is 6 hours. So Naomi worked 6 3/4 hours over across these 2 days, and she made a total of $54. So how do I set up this question? Well, I'm taking that $54 and I'm dividing it by the 6 3/4 hours I worked. I can make this problem a little simpler. Let's pretend I worked 8 hours. If I wanted to know how much I was making per hour, I would take the amount of money, 54, and divide it into 8 groups, or the 8 hours I worked. And that's a little bit of a simpler math. When I see this fraction, 6 3/4, I get a little confused. So sometimes use the strategy of making the problem a little simpler so you can figure out what to do. So $54 over 1. And instead of using division, I'm going to use multiplication. And this 6 3/4 is a mixed number. I need to first make this an improper fraction. So we have 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 is 27/4. That's what 6 3/4 is equivalent to. And when I'm going to be dividing that into 54, I'm actually going to use multiplication and then the reciprocal of 27 over 4, which is 4 over 27. When I look at 54 times 4 over 27, I see a perfect opportunity to use cross cancellation. So I'm going to look at, I can see that 54 and 27 have a common factor of 9. So I'm going to divide each one by 9. 54 divided by 9 is 6, and 27 divided by 9 is 3. So now I have 6 over 1 times 4 over 3, and I get 24 over 3, or 24 divided by 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So, how much does she earn per hour mowing lawns? She earns $8 an hour because we took the $54 and divided it by 6 3/4 hours, and we get 8. It'd be a lot easier if Naomi just worked an even amount of hours. Like, why couldn't she just work 7 hours? Nope, she had to only work 6 3/4. But just because we have a fraction doesn't mean we can't utilize our strategies in order to figure out the answer. So remember, change all your improper fractions to mixed numbers to improper fractions, and make sure that when you're dividing by a fraction, we can use multiplication and the reciprocal. Now for your independent question that you will be expected to bring into class. This is a multi-representation question, meaning you can actually figure it out in more than one way. I'm going to give you a few hints. Let's look at the question. You are measuring walnuts for banana walnut oatmeal and a spinach and walnut salad. So you're making oatmeal and a salad. You need 3/8 cup of walnuts for the oatmeal and 3/4 cup of walnuts for the salad. If you have a 1/4 cup scoop, just write 2 different ways to find how many scoops of walnuts you need. Now, the one way that we can do this is you can take the 3/8 that you need for the oatmeal and the 3/4 cup for the salad and add them together. So one way is to say 3/4 plus 3/8. You can add those up together to find the total amount that you need, and then you can divide it by the 1/4 cup scoop. But the second way that we want you to think about is, could you find out the exact amount of scoops that you need for the oatmeal first, and then figure out the amount of scoops that you would need for the salad, and then add those scoops up? Think about it. Bring it into class, and we'll talk about it. Make sure you write down all your thinking on loose leaf, and don't forget to bring it into school. Hope this video helped. Remember, watch it over and over again if you missed anything.